Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Eric Eager. I'm here with BizNet Software, and I've got Charles Sammons and Floyd Stanley with us. I want to thank you for attending today's webinar, in which we're doing a comparison of BizNet versus Crystal reports. So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to go over some comparisons, kind of hit some high-level features, and kind of help the whole intent of this series is really to educate and inform, and just give you some ideas, to look at some of your reporting challenges. So, let me start out, and what I'm going to do is the objective of this webinar is really twofold. What we're going to do is we're going to hit three main elements right now of comparing the products, but there's a lot more. So first of all, I want to say is that if you find that this webinar is educational and it's helpful for you, please let us know, because we can continue to do a deeper dive in comparing some different features and functionality between the products. So we're going to look at that, and we're trying to give you some ideas of when it's appropriate to use each product, when it'll give you options to think of when you're being asked or have questions about your business and are trying to access data. So with that, here's what we did. We went and we looked at, obviously at BizNet, we know our product quite well, and as a lot of you might know, I'm a CPA, and I've used Crystal in prior lives. And so what we tried to do is that we opened up and tried to do a look and comparison functionality-wise in three main areas, because these were the three main areas that when you're considering looking at reporting solutions. One is accessing your data, so that we're going to look at how do you get to your data, because your data is everywhere these days. Second thing was easy use. Does it require a lot of training and a specialist, or can you have average to intermediate skills to build out reports? And the other thing too is the accuracy of the data. How hard is it for me to find out and validate the numbers that are presented in front of me? So, keeping that in mind, what we did is look and solve this problem. The problem is today is that, and I imagine a number of you on this call have this issue, is that data is everywhere, and believe it or not, it is growing at an exponential rate faster than any other time in history. And so we have data that's in the cloud, we have data that's on-premise, we have data siloed everywhere, and this problem has been persistent for years and is growing. So what has happened in the last recent years is there's a number of products that are coming out to solve the problem. There is dashboard, there is data visualization, there is big data, there is business intelligence. There is a number of tools, and they're all very good. There's a reason why these companies are growing at the rate they're growing at. And so what we did at BizNet is not to sit here and try and displace any of those products. So a lot of the people, a lot of you on this call today have some form or fashion, probably one or many of those products. What we did is said, hey, we're going to focus in on Excel. So in a lot of cases, we're a complement. Even in this conversation about Crystal, we are a complement to Crystal because of the fact that a lot of people end up exporting data directly out of Crystal into Excel to get the reporting their needs met. So with that, why did we pick Excel? Why not build our own interface? Well, we looked at it, and Excel is billion users globally. It is a common standard language of business. It's in 75 different languages. It's pretty much anywhere you email a spreadsheet in business, they can pretty much open it up. Also has extensive presentation layers. And I know that talking to this audience of those attending, I think you guys get it, but we wanted to make sure that we focused on making your life easier. What we're doing as a business is trying to make Excel better. So that's where we're focusing. That's kind of our mission, and that's our niche. Now, in the process of doing that, here's what's happening, is that we want to ask you some questions to kind of see what solutions you're doing, how often are you using Crystal. So I'm going to let Floyd open up a poll, and we're going to ask you a few questions and see what kind of results we get.
Very good, and we'll start out by saying just a quick yes/no. Have you ever created a report in Crystal? And we've already got about almost half of you have already voted, and interestingly enough, right now, like more than 60% of you have indeed done that. We're at 80%. I'm going to close that and share it so that you can see those results really quickly. We'll hide that one, and we'll go to our next quick poll. And that is, we had about 70% of you who said you've created one. This question is, how many of you have tried to create a report? And again, I do appreciate the fact that you're responding so quickly and in such high numbers. Right now, we're at about 3/4 who say yes. 80% of you have voted. That's generally about where I cut that off. So we'll share those results with you. We'll hide that poll, and we'll come to our last question for this little exercise, and that is, how many hours a week do you spend working in Excel? And I suspect that none of you will say 0, but it's interesting to see what this breakdown will be. And again, thanks so much for participating, folks, and doing it so quickly. I'll close that one, share it, and that's a really pretty remarkable distribution across the number of hours. So that gives us an idea of who you folks are. And again, we indeed appreciate the fact that you're here with us today. I'll hand it back over to Eric.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for answering those questions. And you can see that a lot of you try to use Crystal, and it looks like you guys are all spending quite a bit of time in Excel. Greater than 75% of you are spending 10 or more hours a week inside of Excel. So, before we get into really doing a deep dive comparison, company profile comparison, Crystal has been the de facto standard in reporting for a number of years. It was established in '91. So BizNet being the new kids on the block, we've been around since 2000. The other thing, too, is that with the addition of our new product suite that we'll be showing you components of today, we are beginning to be bundled in as the reporting solution for publishers, and we're having a number of conversations currently with software publishers that are interested in offering BizNet as their reporting solution of choice. User base, Crystal's been in 300,000 plus. I got a little bit of typo in there, but you guys get the point. And BizNet we have converted into English, Spanish, French, and German. Crystal, again, since it's been around since '91, owned by SAP, they're in 24 languages. Multiple countries, you can see BizNet's in 50. So we're the new kid on the block, but we're moving fast. And so what I wanted to do in a product comparison at this point is I'm going to walk through the product suite for Crystal, and then I'll walk you through the product suite for BizNet. So the product suite for Crystal, and this is all available. We did most of our research, via internet and talking to people, but really you can go to crystalreports.com and you can see they've got 3 main products. There's SAP Crystal Reports, which is a traditional report writer we've all known and used and built reports in. They also have a they have a Crystal server, and the Crystal server allows people from mobile devices to access reports and submit information and have reports generated for them. So it's more of an enterprise scalable server. And the last component is the Crystal Dashboard Designer. This is a solution that they've provided for data visualization. And so as the name would imply, it's used for building out and creating interactive dashboards in the Crystal environment. In regards to BizNet, we've got three main components. We've got our Biz connectors. I think at last count we're at about 80. We have provided real-time business connections pre-built with business using the data. BizInsight 7, which is our latest addition to the product, that's the underlying in-memory engine that allows you to create create interactive reports all within native Excel. And the last piece, as it would expect, we've got Biz Broadcast. And our broadcast tool allows you to take that one report and mass produce customer or client-specific output format reports at the click of a button. So those are the two product suites. Now what I'm going to do is I'm about to hand it over to Charles Sammons. Charles is our Chief Solution Engineer here at BizNet. And what we're going to do is we're going to review the data options. And we're going to start with Crystal, and then we're going to show you how to do it in BizNet so we can do a comparison and, again, educate and inform and allow you to determine when each product's a good fit for you producing reports. So with that, we're going to go to the data options. We're going to build out a couple of reports, and then we'll review drill down. We'll look at how you drill down in each report. So with that, Floyd, if you don't mind, if you hand it over to Charles, and we'll let him start showing you a product comparison between the two products.
Thanks, Eric. Hopefully you should be seeing my screen pop up here, and it looks like for about 76% of you, this should look pretty familiar, right? This is Crystal Reports, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to build out, as Eric said, I'm going to build out a report and just show you the differences between Crystal Reports and BizInsight. So when I go in to build a Crystal Reports report, I'm going to, of course, open it up, and I have a couple of options available to me. I can do, there are a few different reports I can create. I could certainly use the report wizard. It'll walk me through and help me build a very basic report. But let's suppose that I actually have a question, a business question that I want to answer. Let's suppose that I want to know, what are my total sales by customer, and what are my average sales per invoice for each of my customers. So I want to get a little more in depth. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to choose to create a blank report here because I want to have a little more control over the interface and how I get that data out there. So the first thing, notice that when I create a blank report, notice the first thing that pops up is the database expert. Crystal Reports is very good with their ability to give you numerous connections to multiple data types. Notice we have a number of ODBC connections, Salesforce. Of course, they integrate into SAP. We have a number of ones that we can use. We have a number of different applications that we can use, or different data sets that we can try. What I'm going to do for the purposes of the report that I'm building here is I'm actually going to do a SQL database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the SQL ODBC, which I already have a connection here to my SQL server. And it's going to let me log in, and I'm going to say OK. And now I can go into my database, and I can select the tables that I want to pull data from. So in this case, I'm going to go down to my my invoice table. So I'm going to do my in this database, I'm going to do my AR invoice tables, and I'm going to come here to, I want to pull information for invoice, my invoice detail, and then I also want my customer information. So I'm going to go and grab that table as well. And I'm going to say OK. Now, the next thing that it gives me the ability to do is go in and make sure that the links between the tables are correct. So I'll want to go here and I'll just want to check and make sure that all of the fields that I want to use in my report are going to be interconnected throughout each of these tables. So things like transaction amount back to customer ID and things like that. So I can see that my customer ID is linked, and you'll want to go through and just make sure that those are correct. Once you know they are, I'm going to say OK, and it's going to give me those tables over here in my Field Explorer so that I can go through and I can pull any of the fields from that database that I want to use. And now that I have those fields, I can do any joins or any any SQL formulas or queries that I want to do against those. But what I can do here is the first thing that I'm going to do. Notice that this blank report gives us a few different sections. I've got my report header and my report footer, but I also have my page header and footer and my detail, and those are the things that I want to work in. So if I have anything that I want to appear at the beginning of my report, like a chart or something like that, I can drop it in here. And likewise, anything at the end of my report, I can drop it in this section. But for the purposes of my report, I have detail that I want to have on each page. So I'm going to go in and I would put my headers here for each column, and then my detail here. I'm going to insert a group, because what I want to do is I want to pull this data by customer ID. So I'm going to create a group, and I'm going to go down and select my customer ID. All right, and I'm going to say OK. And now what I can do is I can start adding detail to my report for things like my transaction amounts. Notice here I have fields for my transaction date, my transaction ID, my extended amounts, my transaction amounts, things like that. Now, for the purposes of what we're doing here, I have a report that I've already created that I want to show you, so that you don't have to watch me type in a bunch of data, or a bunch of information. So here is what I've done. Notice I've added my customer ID group, and then to that I've added transaction amount, transaction for each of those. I've added my a summary, so that I can go in and I can do a sum. So I'm going to do a sum of each of my transaction on my transaction amount by customer ID. And then notice I want to do number of transactions. So what I've done here is I've added another summary for transaction amount. But now instead of doing a sum, I've done a count, right? And the same for average amount per transaction. Instead of doing the sum, I've done an average. All right. So I've gone in and created those fields, and I've given them the operators that I want to pull the various pieces of information that I'm looking for. And so now in my report designer, I have a couple of things that I can use. Once I get the report looking the way I want, I can come over here to preview, and I can see just what that report is going to look like. And notice I can walk down through each of my customers, and I now have that information. Now, notice that the report is big and somewhat cumbersome, so I can do roll-ups, or I can format it so that I can use drill downs to get this detail here without having to see it right away. So I'm going to come over here to my designer, and I'm going to select detail, and I'm going to select hide. And now when I go to my report, notice that I have each of my customer IDs here with the different information that I wanted, and I have my average amount per transaction. And if I want to drill down and see any of those transactions, I can do that. I can open that up and expand that and see by transaction ID. Okay, so that's what our report looks like here in Crystal Reports. But now let's shift gears here, and let's show you how you would do the same thing in Excel. Now, for those of you that have built reports in Crystal Reports, the question becomes, okay, how do I transition? Let's suppose we were to use Excel or use BizInsight with Excel for some of our reports that we're creating currently in Crystal. How would I transition? Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm simply going to come over here to my file and I'm going to do an export. And I'm going to export this report out to Excel because one of the things that we do, that BizInsight allows you to do, is automate the existing reports that you have in Excel right now. So I'm going to show you. how that works. So I'm going to say OK, and I can format it here if I want to. But what it's going to do is it's now going to go and it's going to drop that data into Excel for me. And once that pops up, notice now that I have my information here in Excel, and it's all static data, right? It dropped the values in for me. So so what I'm going to do now is I want to make sure that it's actually I want to make sure that I don't have any merged cells here, which I do. So I want to be able to use all of those fields. So so I'm going to come over here. Let me do that again. I just want the data. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to say OK. And let's see. I'll get a report here. So it looks like it's doing some of the. Looks like it's trying to do some of the formatting for me, which we can work with. I want to get just the I want to get just the data. I don't want it formatting it for me. So let me try that again. Okay. Didn't want to do that. All right. So now what I have is I have the my customer ID, and I have all of that information there. I'm going to go through and get rid of some of these. You can see how easy it is to get rid of some of these unwanted columns and rows and things like that. And then of course I want to get rid of that one there. I want to spread that out a little bit. All right. So now I have my report in Excel. So, but again, notice that it's simply static data. So what I'm going to do is BizInsight gives you a couple of tools that you can use to build out these reports. One of those being functions, and the other one being tables. So I can pull data from a table or into a table or a function. Notice here that it asks me when I bring this up. It says, "Where is your data?" I showed you all of the data types or the data sets that you had access to with Crystal Reports. Well, BizInsight gives you that same functionality. We have pre-created connectors that will go to a number of different ERP systems, external data sources, but also with Excel, because of the integration that we have with Excel, any of the data sources that Excel can connect to, we can use that data as well, and that is, and it's just as extensive. I notice I can go to a SQL server. I can use Microsoft Query, Access databases. I can use ODBC connections, and with Power Query, I can actually do a. Notice I have all of these different data sets that I can pull from. ODBC, Salesforce, Microsoft CRM, SharePoint. I have all these different resources that I can pull data. And once you get your data into Excel, we're able to utilize that so that you can create reports off of it. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, I'm just going to use a sample data set that we have with Sage 500. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my my query tool, and I'm going to select my ERP, and then it is going to ask me which data set I want to use. Notice I have a number of different data sets that I can pull from. I'm going to go down to my invoice detail, and I'm going to pull that. So in this case, I want to use my I'm going to use my customer invoice summary detail, and my invoice date. And now notice this pops up. It's a wizard. It will let me create that query. So I'm going to say it's going to ask me what action I'd like to take, and I'm going to do a sum, and I'm going to do it by, I want to pull the transaction amount, and then I'm going to go down here and set my filters. So the first thing that it wants is company ID, start date, and end date. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to add those dates here, and I'll show you here in just a second how just how versatile this is. So I'm going to come over here and make sure that this is set right, and just to make sure I cover everything, I'm going to use a pretty wide range here, and then I'll show you here in just a second how we can narrow that. But to make sure that I get everything, I'm going to go ahead and include those dates. So I'm going to select a company ID. I can do multiple companies if I want to, which is great. And then I'm going to set my parameters here. Notice that when I select this grid, it lets me choose the cell where my value is, and we recommend using cell references because of the functionality it gives you, and I'll show you that here in just a second. And then I'm going to add one more filter because I want to filter by customer ID, obviously. So I'm going to do that, and I'll show you here in a second as well. I'm going to do equals, but I have a number of different choices that I can use in terms of range here. So I'm going to anchor this to that column. I'm going to say OK. I'll make sure that's the right. Oh, let's see. I'm sorry. So I'm going to anchor this to that column. Say OK, and notice that it comes up and asks me where I want to place this this value. I can put it anywhere on the report that I want, but of course I want it here. So I'm going to say OK. Now you probably noticed that the number didn't change, but that's because it's gone out and it's pulled that same value. We pulled from the same table, so I have the same value. Now, if I remember how you said, okay, well in the other report I actually was able to get the transaction detail. Well, the great thing is with BizInsight, what's built into the product is the ability to do that very thing. I can right-click on that value, and I can go down and drill down into that number, and I can get the detail from the database as well. I can do it in a table, but what I can also do is I can do it as a pivot table. A lot of people like to use pivot tables in Excel because of because of the flexibility, and the integration that we have with Excel gives you the ability to take advantage of that. Notice I can select my, I can click the table and I get my field editor, so that I can come and I can move fields around and do all the things that people like to do with these pivot tables. My transaction amount certainly is my sum, but let's suppose that I want to now I want to use my transaction ID as my row header. I can do that, or actually my transaction number, right? I can do that. And then let's suppose that I want to do my transaction type as my column header. So now I can see, is it a credit memo, a finance charge, or an invoice? And notice that it does that. It totals them for me and everything. With an added bonus that if I want to see the database detail for that value, all I have to do is double-click it, and it's still going to give me the line item detail from the database. So as you can see, the drill down is extremely versatile, easy to use, and gives you the ability to really cater the data to look the way that you and your users want it to look. And again, that's available just by virtue of the fact that we're using BizInsight functions. Now, to get number of transactions and an average amount per transaction, all I have to do is I'm going to copy that function over here, and then I'm going to go up here to my editor, and I'm going to change the my operator. Instead of a sum, I want to do a count. All right, and notice that I can do a count against any of the fields in that data set, and I can use any of those fields as my filter. But I want to do a count instead of a sum, so I'm going to say OK. And now I have the transaction amount, or I have the number of transactions. And to average, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy that over, and I'm just going to come up here, and I'm going to change my operator to average. Much the same as the way I did it in Crystal Reports. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do here, Crystal Reports was kind enough to add a line between each, but I can still to get this the rest of this report, all I have to do is drag that down each column, and notice that it's going to go in and it's going to fill in those values for me automatically. Same likewise, notice that 61, 48, 18, those are my top numbers. I'm going to drag that down, and it's going to go in and it's going to fill in each of those for me as well. And likewise, I'm going to copy down my average amount per transaction. And when I copied that, when I exported this report out to Excel, I let Crystal Reports do the formatting for me, and so obviously I wouldn't recommend doing that because it surprised me with some extra lines. But the functionality is still the same. You would obviously do adjust the data. But now I can drill down into any of these values. All right, I can see, so I can get to the drill down detail from any one of these values. So extremely functional in terms of giving me the ability to drill down. And then now what I can do is I have access to all of the functionality of Excel. Let's suppose I wanted to add a chart to show, what is my average amount per transaction, by customer. I could do that. I could come over here. I could do I'm going to highlight that. Actually, let me see. I'm going to grab that for my title. I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to go here to Insert and do Chart. And I actually want to do, I'm going to do a bar chart here. And so now what I can do is I can add a chart in here, and it's going to show me each of my users. And then what I can do here is I can update this. I'm simply going to click here, and I'm going to use my company. I'm going to use, I keep forgetting that's in column A. I'm going to use my company IDs as my axis values. And so now, notice that it has added all of my axis values here, and so I've just quickly added a chart. Now, I could also do things like I could total these each of these charts. So I'm going to add a total here. But once again, we can use BizInsight as the totaling, for this report, or I can use Excel functionality. All right. So I can come over here and I can use AutoSum. So we can use BizInsight functions in conjunction with Excel functions to do these to build out this report to make it look the way that we want. Now, notice here that if I add all of these together, it's not actually going to give me the average amount per transaction. So what I can do here is I'm just going to do this. I'm going to use a different parameter, and now I get the correct number here. So I get my actual average amount. So now I have this. You've seen how we've created this report. So the last thing I want to show you is now what I can do is I can start filtering this. Remember how I showed you we set this each of these to with the start date and end date. Suppose I want to get a little more granular and I want to find out how many reports or how many transactions my customers did for the year 2007. I can do that by simply changing my changing those dates, my start and end date. So here I have I'm going to go from January 2007 to December 2007, and now watch my my entire report is going to it's going to go out to the database. It's going to find that that data, and my entire report is going to update. And see how my chart that's attached to that table has updated as well. So now, suppose I want to do this even further, and let's say that I want to add another function here because I want to know how many. You know, I want to focus on not the small transactions, but I want to know how many of my customers have a you know, an average amount or a transaction amount above, say, 25,000. So I'm gonna come right here and I'm gonna say transaction amount. All right, and I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna put in 25,000. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go edit my function, and I'm going to add another filter and say transaction amount is greater than. Remember I was telling you there are a number of different operators I can use. I want to use greater than or equal to, and I'm going to point it here, and I'm going to say OK. And so now I'm only going to get a total transaction amount for transactions that are greater than 25,000. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm only going to get a count for those transactions that are greater than 25,000. And likewise, I'm going to get an average amount for those functions that are greater than 25,000. Notice how this really starts to it changes the scope of this report and it gives you a little different view. So you can start to see how some of your customers have more, you know, they're doing larger, you know, you can see who the customers are that are doing larger transactions with you. And that can help you make business decisions in terms of marketing. Who are we going to, you know, we have a finite amount of marketing dollars. Who am I going to focus those on? This will help you to see, okay, my big customers. You could change that. Let's say I want to say who are my $50,000 per transaction customers. All right, I can do that just by simply now that I've added that to my report. I can do that. All right, so all I have to do is update that parameter in my report updates for me. And now this is for 2007. Suppose I want to see all of my customers for 2008. All I have to do is change the parameters of that report. I'm going to change my start and end date to reflect 2008, and now it's going to go out and it's going to refresh that report for me, and it's going to show me, you know, who my customers were for 2008. Okay, and I can even do things like I can do conditional formatting, so that if I come in here, I want to say, you know, who are my top, let's say I want to, you know, who are my top 5 customers, all right? Notice that it'll do that for me automatically. And let's say I want to change this to 100,000. Again, my entire report is going to update. My conditional formatting is going to change, and it's going to It's going to update that entire report. And I've done all of that in, as we've watched here, in just a matter of a few minutes. So I'm going to turn the time back over to Eric.
All right, Charles. So if Floyd, if you can pass it over back to me, I will. All right. So thanks, Charles. And here's what I want to do, and you guys can obviously read the screen, but I'll go through, and again, this is for you to take in information and decide which product fits the particular report needs you need at a particular time. So what we try to do is a very high level, look at some of the main areas that you need to consider when looking at the report. The report design, obviously in Excel, in BizNet in Excel, Crystal reports, you're using a header, a detail, and a footer. So in some cases, that's going to be appropriate for the report. Sometimes it's not. What we try to do is target what type of user who's going to build a report. Consumers of reports, that's a different story, but if you're going to build a report, for BizNet, you can be an average to intermediate Excel user. Crystal, you get to a certain extent, is going to require some database expertise, and you're going to have to know a little bit of programming language. Training required, a lot of cases in a 2-hour watching videos, you can be proficient, especially with our new super query capabilities. Crystal is, as most of the audience has built reports using Crystal, it can be extensive. There is enormous functionality in there. It just takes a lot of training to get there. Data access, the difference between BizNet and Crystal is that we have built, pre-built, and have normalized business views for our known systems. So across a number of systems, we've already gone through and sifted through and made the business data available in a business user-friendly format. You can always get to the database, and you got to, again, be a database expert using multiple data connections. You can do that through Excel, or you can do that through Crystal. Calculations, you have any Excel function available at your disposal. In Crystal, once you get behind, once you get past some functions, and you start to, exactly what Charles had shown you, where you had to go, I want to see a particular date range, I want to see greater than this amount. You can get there in Crystal. It's just going to require a little more programming. Combining data, BizNet, we didn't show you today. The intent today was to give you an introductory, but we can do drag and drop. Each cell in the spreadsheet can be a data point from a completely different data source. Crystal, you have to go through a connection wizard, and you have to write a number of different joins to make that happen. As most of you on the call know, BizNet has done very well in the financial reporting arena, but now with the advent of our new technologies, the new super query that we showed you today, we are now having the ability to not only build financials, but a number of operational reports. So if you've got anything outside of financials and would like to have and continue to operate within Excel and automate those processes, bring that into consideration in BizNet. Crystal does a very good job operationally. That is, again, the de facto standard in a number of reporting solutions. If anybody's tried to build a financial statement, it's just not its strength. And as you can tell, architecturally, I don't think it was designed for financials. Can you get it done? Yes, it's just painful. But otherwise, it does a phenomenal job on your operational reports. Web access. Okay, mobile users. BizNet can broadcast out Excel, PDF, in a static format. We also have the ability to publish to a website via FTP or HTML. Here's where Crystal has the ability for you to drill down. We are working on it. We don't have it yet, but you can produce and send reports via HTML, so you can access them through your website or browser. The drill down, Crystal, you can do that with Crystal, except it requires the Crystal server technology to do that, which is an add-on. And the drill down. the drill downs, as you saw, BizNet can do a list and a pivot. Crystal has done a good job of allowing you to create multiple level drill downs so that you can put on there what items you want to show in the drill down, and you can have multiple layers of drill down. So, if you're needing something with that level of detail, Crystal Reports does a very nice job for you on that. So with that, we've got about, we left about 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes at the end for questions. So I'm going to let Floyd kind of open up. And for those who have not entered questions, now's the time to enter those in, and time permitting, we will go through and answer the most of the questions we can get to, time permitting.
Well, hey, at the very beginning, it was obvious that we have a number of Crystal experts on the line. We got some suggestions as to how to do that export, and I promised we'll put those in the presentation recording. One of the observations, though, was that I see the customer IDs are hard-coded from the export from Crystal. Can BizNet tell you which customers have transactions? And actually, Charles, I think that you covered that in your report modification exercise, where you imposed a number of filters on those. So that was an excellent observation. Now, can the functions or transactions in BizInsight be used with an operation system as opposed to financial general ledger? And the answer is absolutely. We have a number of systems already that connect directly to operational data. There was a follow-up question, though, that said, what if it's not an ERP? And the answer to that is that since we complement Excel and since we're based on Excel, any information that can be exported to Excel by whatever mechanism, including Power Query or Power BI, anything that you can get into Excel can be queried using these techniques that you saw today. We've been asked if a recording is going to be made available. Absolutely. And let's see. We have a question. I'll go to the last one first because this is, would you say today's demo is really of how BI, I wonder if the question is BizInsight, is an addition to Crystal, and that is let Crystal link the tables and pull the data source, but use Excel for the parameters and the formatting. One of you want to handle that one?
Yeah, so what happens is that now that we have extended our capabilities, and you hit the nail on the head, you can use Crystal to pull the data into Excel as a data source, and then use BizInsight as your presentation reporting technology. And that means, so the questions regarding using Crystal to pull the data, that holds true for any operational data. Anywhere where you can get your data, BizNet can build reports against it now. And so, tagline is, we make Excel better. And that's one of the things we're very proud of. And on a future webinar, we can talk about the in-memory technology under the covers. It's allowing us to use large data sets. It doesn't have that appearance in the demo because it's under the covers, but the idea that we can handle millions of rows now, and you can query, your imagination is up to you of what questions you want to ask of your data. The real power here is that if getting data within Excel was no longer a problem, and you had the ability to easily ask questions, how beneficial would that be to your company? But great question. Keep those coming.
All right, here we go. And this is a user with one of the, well, actually with the first product that BizNet supported. I'd like to be able to create my own financial reports in BizNet with the ability to have multiple drill downs. For example, the main page would be a balance sheet, and one line item could be other assets. Is there an ability to drill down on that line to a report class code level in EAS, and then a further drill down to an account level. I've only been able to drill down into account level transactions from an individual account.
Again, that's a very good question, and we are in the process of developing the ability to do multiple types of drill downs. One example of that is that we are now integrating with document management systems. So the first one we have integrated to is PaperSave, and we have DocLink, the next one coming. So that in regards to the question, you drill down to an invoice. You drill down in General Ledger to a transaction with an invoice number. At that point, then you right-click and you could drill down from and carry that invoice number to the document management system, which would then pull up the invoice associated with that transaction, and you wouldn't have to leave Excel. So as of today, we're that particular integration is rolling out in this month. And in regards to other systems, we'll have to investigate and get your feedback on what other things you would like us to do. But we are responding to that, and we're trying to expand it into multiple drill downs, not only within the system, but also into other systems.
Yeah, let me handle this one. In the example, the vendors were static values. Does BizNet allow these to be updated as new vendors are added? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Those reports can be set up where the vendors themselves, or any list, customers, suppliers, vendors, can be a dynamic list, and the values will fill in dynamically. We had also a couple of questions about would Crystal be the export mechanism? And no, it does not have to be. BizInsight, the Biz connectors particularly, but BizInsight's ability to work with any data in Excel means that you don't have to use Crystal as the export mechanism. And here is another great question, and this woman will be getting a call from our sales staff here really quickly. We have BizInsight, but it doesn't look as sophisticated as your version. Yes, there have been multiple upgrades since 2011. As a matter of fact, there's been an upgrade since the beginning of this year, and we will work to get those into your hands. Another question, and hi Peggy, BizNet allowed the option for multiple companies. In some, and the question is BizInsight restricted to a multiple company? In some ERPs in the current iteration, it does not allow for a multi-value in the company. However, that is quickly becoming a part of the base level product. More and more multiple parameters are being made available.
Okay.
Let's see what else we have. How to purchase. Yes, you're going to get a call. Can these functions be connected to a visual dashboard? And absolutely. They're dynamic, and so as a result, since we work in Excel and since we're a complement to a lot of other tools, whenever a report is refreshed, whenever new data is accessed, indeed it will trigger updates in those visual elements on the page. I think I got them all.
You know what, and I'm sure we're going to have some more questions, but I think we're getting close to the end of the hour. So a couple of things. Next steps. Well, first of all, if this has been helpful, again, we want to educate and inform. You know, we're in the business of selling software, don't get me wrong, but we also want to do a good job of presenting you options and educating you on what we find out. Again, do your own homework. We do our homework and share with you what we find out. And so if this has been helpful and you found that this was informative and would like to see more comparisons of BizNet with Crystal or other products, please let us know. If you can, email myself or Charles or info@biznetsoftware.com, and love to hear from you. Love to see if this has been helpful, because if it has, we'll continue to provide this type of information for you to hopefully make your life easier. And if you need additional information, questions, follow-up, etc., our emails are on the screen right now. Mine's eager@BizNet Software. Charles is C. Salmons, and then we got info@BizNet Software as well. Also visit our website. But anything we can do to help and any input you can provide us. Hey, for those Crystal experts out there, love to hear from you and tell us how can we help you. Crystal Reports has been a phenomenal tool for a number of years. A lot of people have it. And if there's ways that we can plug some gaps, or you can provide us feedback on things you'd like to see, again, love to have your input. So we're at the bottom of the hour. Again, thank you everybody for your time and attendance today. We sure appreciate, hope this has been helpful for you, and stay tuned for our next webinar that we'll have in a couple of weeks. Got to check our schedule, but we're having a bunch of educational webinars, so just stay tuned for the next one. And again, thank you for your time today.